It is odd. The read-through had ended a while ago, but there is still no sign of Inseop. Wooyeon rechecks his watch, wondering where he can be. He may be cloddish, but he was always on time. So what happened to him now? As Wooyeon is about to glance at his watch once more, his attention is diverted by someone's laughter. It's one of the crew members from the film set. The crew member remarks on how often Wooyeon checks his watch as if he's got somewhere incredibly urgent to be. Wooyeon attempts to brush off the comment with a laugh, but then he notices Inseop sprinting as if his life depended on it. Wooyeon is taken aback by this sight because, despite previous urgent situations, he's never witnessed Inseop running, let alone running as if he's racing to catch a train. Puzzled, Wooyeon wonders what might have spurred him to move so urgently and resolves to investigate further. He informs the people that he has been talking to and that he needs to leave now and follows Inseop out quietly. Once he finds him again, he is surprised to see him standing in front of a vending machine instead of bringing the card to him as he requested. Too bad he can't slap some sense into that tiny brain of his for making him wait. He watches him buy a can of soda and slips behind him quietly, grabbing the drink he bought for himself. As anticipated, Inseop is shocked to find him there and turns around to look at him with his mouth agape and eyes popping out like buttons. Wooyeon thanks him for the drink and tells him that he is actually feeling thirsty. On the way back to the car, he asks him why he is late. He had been waiting for quite some time after all. But Inseop's response is less than satisfactory. Instead of explaining, he just looks down and apologizes. Wooyeon asks him if something happened to him or if he left him to meet someone else, but still no explanation comes. His face, though, tells another story entirely. It looked like he could cry any moment now. What did he think? Was he going to fool him while making a face like that? Just say what happened already. Wooyeon felt his patience wearing thin, recognizing that being harsh with Inseop wouldn't yield any answers. Thus, he opted for a different tactic. Calling out to Inseop, he observed how round his eyes were when he turned to face him. Despite Inseop's inadequate attempts at deception, Wooyeon couldn't help but be struck by the innocence reflected in those eyes. It made him loathe Inseop even more. Abandoning the idea of questioning Inseop directly about his whereabouts, Wooyeon instead advises him to exercise caution around individuals in the entertainment industry, as they often are the sole reason for many of the issues happening around them. Inseop acknowledges this advice, and when Wooyeon seeks confirmation that he comprehends the implication, Inseop interprets it as a warning to be more vigilant around people. Agreeing with his advice, Inseop commits to following the suggestion. It is still evident to Wooyeon that Inseop was surely looking for someone else, but it pisses him off a great deal that he still won't spill the beans on it. This was ludicrous. If he really plans to fool someone, at least he should do it properly. Why go to such lengths? As Wooyeon tries to gather his thoughts, his vision is suddenly obscured by the headlights of an approaching vehicle. He wonders who would dare to do such a thing. But as he glimpses the driver, he recognizes Kang Yeonmo. One glance at that jerk was enough for Wooyeon to understand what could have transpired between him and Inseop. He now knew what, or rather, who was responsible for making him wait. Meanwhile, Inseop continues to search his pockets, intending to fetch another soda for the jerk. Wooyeon intervenes, seizing Inseop's hand to halt him. Pushing it back into his pocket, he instructs him not to do anything. With a firm grip on Inseop's hand, Wooyeon guides him towards Kang Yeonmo. Approaching the driver's side window, Wooyeon inquires Yeonmo if he is departing. Yeonmo confirms, stating he has an appointment elsewhere, then gestures towards Inseop. However, before he can say anything, Wooyeon cuts him off. He can feel Inseop's hand trembling in his grip. He informs Yeonmo that they are also in a hurry and will be departing now. He bids Yeonmo farewell and begins to depart with Inseop in tow. Yeonmo is furious. He starts yelling at Inseop, asking if he was ignoring what he asked for. Inseop didn't want this. He wanted to do what he was asked for and get this done with, but Wooyeon was still gripping his hand. Before he can offer an apology to Yeonmo, once more Wooyeon intervenes, inquiring about Yeonmo's request. Yeonmo exclaims that he asked his manager for a Coke, but now he is leaving without fulfilling the request. Wooyeon casually remarks that considering how busy his manager was, it might have slipped his mind. He extends the can he had taken from Inseop earlier, suggesting that Yeonmo take it instead if it is urgent. Yeonmo is completely flabbergasted by his audacity, but before he can refute it, Wooyeon suggests that he can buy a soda from the convenience store on his way out, or he can simply drink some water instead, since that will be a healthier option. For the second time, without waiting for a response, he bids goodbye to Yeonmo. While returning to the car, he advises Inseop against looking back and inquires if Yeonmo has given him orders. Inseop, with tear-filled eyes, apologizes for the trouble. Wooyeon, adopting a gentler tone, advises him not to heed Yeonmo's commands anymore. He emphasizes that despite any potential commotion, Inseop should remember that he is his manager, not Yeonmo's. He asks Inseop if he understood, to which Inseop nods, promising that it won't ever happen again. Wooyeon approves of his answer, but he notices that Inseop is trying to say something while looking meaningfully at the hand that he had been holding. He asks him what's the matter. Inseop hesitates for a moment and shows his hand, and Wooyeon realizes what he means. He still has the soda that he bought. He lets go of his hand immediately, snatching the can from it and suggesting they should throw it away. Without a moment of thought, Wooyeon flings the can straight into a trash bin, and Inseop can't help but remember how his grandma used to say that the people who wasted food were bad. Yes, she was right after all. Once the can is out of Inseop's hand, Wooyeon notices the scratch marks all over his palms. He looks at Inseop and asks him if he had a fall. Inseop responds that it's nothing, but Wooyeon isn't having it. He spins Inseop by his shoulder, now facing him completely, and asks him where he got those scratches. Inseop quickly attempts to conceal his hands behind his back and explains that he simply stumbled while descending to the parking lot. Wooyeon inquires if he fell backward, but Inseop, brushing off his backside, remains silent. Nevertheless, Wooyeon doesn't press further. He already has a clear understanding of what occurred. People don't fall backward easily. It only happens when something harmful approaches them from the front, seeing how Yeonmo flashed and almost hit him just moments ago. He already knew that he did the same with Inseop. Wooyeon laughs at his audacity and almost calls him a bad word, but when Inseop interjects, he stops himself and gets in the car. He asks Inseop to take him to the gym before going home because he wants to exercise. Inseop agrees and gets in, but he is quite sure that he heard Wooyeon saying something related to feces just a few moments ago. Inseop guesses that it was surely a bad word, but he is unsure. So, he lets it go and starts the car. At the same time, Mr. Cha relishes being back from his much-needed vacation, because the CEO kept begging and clinging on to him desperately to be Wooyeon's manager. He agreed to it, but he had to compromise his mental health in exchange for it and ask for an extra prescription from his doctor. He wouldn't have to go through all of this if only Inseop had not taken such drastic steps to save a jerk like Wooyeon. He got hurt so badly that he had to stay in the hospital for days, but he had no time to rest and get back to his work immediately. He didn't even have the time to sleep properly so he could get better. The pity that Mr. Cha felt for Wooyeon's previous managers was nothing in comparison to what he felt for Inseop. His heart hurt for Inseop a lot, and to top it all off, he was also Lee Wooyeon's #1 fan. This was all just too much. As he enters the office, thoughts of his increasing emotional sensitivity with age preoccupy his mind, until Inseop greets him at the elevator door. Surprised by Inseop's presence, he inquires about Inseop's well-being and asks if he came to the office today to review his schedule, to which Inseop nods. Mr. Cha is once again struck with Inseop's sincerity. He comes to the office like clockwork to check Wooyeon's schedule by himself, when he can easily get it over his phone through text or email. He is nice to a fault even to the cleaning staff. Mr. Cha does not doubt that Inseop is very nice and soft-hearted, but it also feels like he always draws a clear line when it comes to others. The CEO, however, never lingered on these musings. Upon Inseop's arrival, he greets him with his usual enthusiasm and invites him to sit down. Sensing Inseop's uncertainty, he teases him gently, assuring him that he won't bite and encouraging him to relax, noting Inseop's tendency to appear nervous whenever he visits the office. Once Inseop has taken a seat, the CEO offers him a Coke and asks him about Wooyeon. Inseop takes out his notebook and informs the CEO that Wooyeon is keeping very busy since interview requests keep coming in, and he is preparing to start with a new series too. He is even working out and rehearsing regularly. He then flips a page from his notebook and informs the CEO that Wooyeon has 2 interviews and a film preview scheduled today. He adds that he also has an entertainment program booked for today. The CEO can't contain his laughter at Inseop's meticulousness. He chuckles and tells Inseop that all he wants to know is how Wooyeon is doing. He didn't ask for such a detailed explanation. Inseop, once again thinking that he made a mistake, apologizes immediately. The CEO expresses curiosity about the night's schedule, and Inseop quickly informs him about Wooyeon's departure at 10 p.m. However, the CEO clarifies that he is interested in Inseop's plans rather than Wooyeon's. Inseop hadn't anticipated this request. He mentions that he plans to go straight home tonight. However, the CEO suggests that he stop by the office before heading home. Once more, he seeks Inseop's confirmation, and without hesitation, Inseop agrees to comply with the request. Inseop is trying to catch a breather in the car, sipping his drink, when someone taps on the window, making him jump out of his skin. It is Wooyeon. He crouches down and asks Inseop what he is drinking. Inseop squeaks a shaky hello while still trying to calm his nerves down. As Inseop rolls down the windows, Wooyeon remains awaiting his response. Being his impatient self as always, he crosses his arms and reiterates his question about his beverage. Inseop promptly replies that it's herbal medicine. Intrigued, Wooyeon remarks that he wasn't aware of Inseop's interest in such remedies. Inseop explains that he received it from Mr. Cha during his visit to the office earlier today. Thinking about it made Inseop determine that he too needed to give Mr. Cha something back in return as a thanks for this thoughtful gift. Just to make sure that he didn't forget about it, he even wrote it in his book 3 times. Both Inseop and the CEO were taken aback when Mr. Cha unexpectedly presented the herbal medicine to Inseop in the office. Mr. Cha remarked that he had observed Inseop appearing under the weather in recent days, and since he was already getting one for himself, he decided to get one for Inseop as well. The CEO, suddenly feeling left out, had complained to Mr. Cha about not getting one for him, but Mr. Cha had called him a man-child and remarked that he was perfectly capable of affording one on his own. So how could he even question it? Does he not have a conscience? Another bout of bickering had started among them about whose money was more valuable, but Inseop was completely tuned out. He had other important things on his mind. He was calculating how much he needed to pay Mr. Cha back for this expensive medicine. After searching through his wallet, he inquired about the total cost, explaining that he was slightly low on cash. He planned to withdraw more money once he knew the exact amount. Mr. Cha was taken aback by his question. He told Inseop that he didn't mean to pay for it because he gave it to him as a gift. Inseop told him that he didn't require it because he was already healthy, but Mr. Cha countered that he should take it to get even healthier. He asked him not to worry about it and just accept the gift. The CEO also encouraged him to do the same, saying that it is nice to accept these kinds of gifts. Inseop had no other option but to accept the gift, but his heart was heavy with guilt once again. He didn't deserve such care from them. Mr. Cha even told him that if he kept on saying no, he would feel bad about it. And so, it was settled. Finally, Inseop accepted the medicine with a smile. That was something unusual that Inseop had to deal with today, but it wasn't all. In addition to receiving an expensive gift, the car he was driving today was a sedan borrowed from the office due to the van undergoing repairs. Adding to the oddities, Wooyeon unexpectedly occupied the front passenger seat instead of the usual backseat. The sudden change left Inseop puzzled. Why is he sitting here out of the blue? When Inseop hesitates to start the car after Wooyeon has settled in, Wooyeon inquires about the delay. Inseop nervously questions whether Wooyeon prefers to sit in the back, to which Wooyeon assures him that he's comfortable where he is. But Inseop is anything but comfortable with this. He nervously takes another sip of his medicine, hoping that it will help him survive today. Wooyeon remarks on Inseop's diligent consumption of the medicine, to which Inseop explains that he feels obliged to, considering it was a considerate gift. Wooyeon then shares his aversion to herbal medicines containing ingredients like black goats or turtles, but he's open to trying other remedies. Inseop is taken aback by this revelation, not because of Wooyeon's preferences, but because he now realizes the contents of the medicine he's been taking. Wooyeon, unaware of Inseop's dilemma, or pretending not to notice his discomfort, continues to tell him that those kinds of medicines are just not for him and he doesn't need those often anyway, because he rarely falls sick. Inseop, just to make sure he heard him correctly, once again asks him to confirm what exactly doesn't sit well with him. Wooyeon looks at him, smiles, and tells him that of course, he's talking about black goats and turtles. What else? Inseop is utterly baffled by the situation. He takes a moment to process the information and then glances down at the medicine he has been consuming. His disbelief turns to horror as he gazes at the label, adorned with an illustration of a turtle and a black goat joyfully dancing in the sun. It's like a nightmare brought to life for him. He attempts to excuse himself, hurriedly wiping his mouth of the nightmarish liquid he's been ingesting. When Wooyeon queries what he believed he was consuming, Inseop innocently replies that he assumed it was simply medicine. Wooyeon chuckles, reassuring him that black goat is actually beneficial, even though he didn't verify the ingredients beforehand. Inseop feels nauseous at the revelation. Wooyeon grins at Inseop and remarks that when the medicine comes from Mr. Cha, it's ensured to be meticulously made, utilizing every part of the animal, an entire black goat and a turtle. He continues, expressing his incredulity at the idea of turning a whole goat into liquid and ensuring the turtle is boiled properly for its supposed strength-boosting properties. Gesturing to the satchel Inseop still holds, he encourages him to take another sip. He advises Inseop to take it 3 times a day, 30 minutes after every meal to get the maximum benefits. After all, he needs to take care of himself. Inseop being Inseop, even though he feels like vomiting any minute now, gets burdened by Wooyeon's thoughtfulness and agrees to follow his advice and takes another sip of that horrendous medicine. Wooyeon pauses for a minute and observes Inseop. The dude looks like he could die any minute now. He hears Inseop mumbling something about not feeling well and chuckles at the ridiculousness of the situation. At least he now has something amusing to check after his meals. A moment later, once Inseop seems to be doing fine and they are on their way, Wooyeon goes back to the task at hand, the script that he needs to go through. The script is full of notes to make it easier for him to understand. The CEO used to say that his work ethic was not suitable for him. But for him, who can't even understand emotions, this much was necessary. Acting is something that requires a lot of thought and consideration toward the character's emotions, angry or sad. Understanding the reason behind these feelings makes a huge impact after all. And since this is something that Wooyeon is incapable of, he needs to pay extra attention to nail the character perfectly. But the task is proving to be difficult for him, because he can feel Inseop boring a hole in his head from beside him. He glances at him and advises him to look at the road instead of staring at him because it is dangerous. Inseop, taken off guard by being caught, jumps like a rabbit in his seat and apologizes immediately. As they come to a stop sign, Wooyeon questions Inseop about his apparent fascination with him. He teasingly wonders if Inseop enjoys the proximity of having a celebrity whom he admires so ardently, sitting so close that he can't help but keep staring. Without meeting Wooyeon's eyes, Inseop responds that he finds this surreal. When Wooyeon asks him what he means, he explains that the feeling of being so close to someone whom he has only admired from a distance is truly surreal to him. And this time, he isn't even lying. Ever since he knew him, all he could do was admire him from a distance and think of how different they were from each other. Never in a million years had he thought that he would get so close to him to even have a conversation. In the past, it was Jenny who had barged into his room and interrupted what he was doing so that they could go see the prince. She was very enthusiastic because the football team was going to practice for a game that day. When Peter objected that he wasn't ready, she assured him that he looked just fine and practically dragged him out to the field. Anxious about not finding a seat because of the crowd, both of them had to run with all their might, even though Peter's weak heart had slowed them down and he needed to stop to catch his breath. And that was exactly when Peter first saw the prince. He didn't even need an introduction. You could tell at a glance that it was him. His quarterback shoulders, just as Jenny had told him, were a dead giveaway. And he was Asian too, just like him. Peter's heart was beating uncontrollably. But even though these whirlwinds of newfound emotions and so many similarities between them, he immediately knew that the prince and him were worlds apart. There was nothing to even compare. Lost in reminiscence about his first encounter with Wooyeon, Inseop fails to notice the green light, prompting Wooyeon to snap him back to reality. Inseop apologizes before proceeding. Wooyeon muses about Inseop's meticulousness all the time, but also notices his occasional clumsiness, pondering which version of him is the authentic one. With his angelic smile, he turns back to Inseop and sarcastically remarks about how everyone harbors a hidden side. These biting comments deeply unsettle Inseop. He strives to play along as smoothly as possible, but internally, not only does sitting beside Wooyeon heighten his anxiety, but he also struggles with deciphering Wooyeon's intentions. To mask his uneasiness, he decides to come up with something quickly and blurts it out at the first chance he gets. He informs Wooyeon about the 2 magazine interviews scheduled today, the movie screening in the afternoon that he has to attend, and the additional interview for the entertainment program that is set up for the evening. Wooyeon looks at him and responds that he already knows all of this. Of course, he would know his own schedule. Stupid Inseop. Inseop stutters and informs him that he has already compiled the relevant information for the interviews in a file for him. Wooyeon tells him that he will take a look. Inseop then goes on to tell him that he has also prepared an outfit for him for the movie screening. Wooyeon thanks him. That's it. He's out of topics now. He can't do this anymore. He can't keep the conversation going. What exactly is he supposed to say now? He laughs awkwardly to himself because the silence added to Wooyeon's constant gaze is killing him. In his anxiousness, he once again misses a turn, and when Wooyeon corrects him, he apologizes automatically. Wooyeon tells him that since he missed the turn, he would now have to go back and do a P-turn instead of a U-turn because there is not enough space, but he assures Inseop that it is not a problem because they have plenty of time left. Following Wooyeon's suggestion, Inseop tries to shake off his persistent gaze, but it continues to make him anxious. Summoning his courage, he finally questions Wooyeon if there's something on his face. Wooyeon denies it, further adding to Inseop's confusion regarding his constant stare. Inseop dismisses his concerns, attributing the unease to his own overthinking. A moment later, Wooyeon asks him where he will be during the interviews, and Inseop tells him that he will stay in the car. With an encouraging smile, Wooyeon suggests that he should come and sit next to him instead since the interviews are going to take a while and it will be uncomfortable to sit in the car for that long. Inseop laughs lightly at the notion, yet internally, he grapples with the sudden change in Wooyeon's attitude. Eventually, he lets out a heavy sigh and assures Wooyeon that he'll remain close by. However, Wooyeon notices his exaggerated sigh and probes further, questioning if something is troubling him. Inseop brushes it off as inconsequential, but deep down, he's troubled because despite working for Wooyeon for a month now, he hasn't managed to discern his weakness yet. Wooyeon, on the other hand, leans back in his seat and tries to figure out this enigma called Choi Inseop. He notices how he's trying so hard to act unbothered when in reality he is so tense and anxious. Wooyeon is almost excited to find out what kind of expressions he's going to make once he discovers his true nature. He smirks at the thought and leaves first when they arrive at their destination, asking Inseop to follow him after parking the car. Inseop parks the car in the garage and is about to head in when someone stops him with a tap on his shoulder. It is a lady. With a stern look, she asks Inseop to confirm if this is the place where Wooyeon Oppa is having an interview today. Inseop confirms it, still jogging his memory of who this woman is, when a sudden realization hits him like a brick. This woman is the same person who threw a coffee at him that one time. Even Wooyeon wanted to do nothing with her after that incident. But she makes a scene here too. How did she even find out that they were going to be here in the first place? But this time seems different, because instead of yelling or throwing a tantrum, she simply hands Inseop a letter, requesting him to pass it on to Wooyeon. Surely, letters won't be a problem, right? Inseop takes the letter and tells her that he will do that. Wooyeon waves and introduces him to the journalist, once he gets in before continuing with the interview again. While they talk about Wooyeon's upcoming TV series, Inseop finds a seat in a corner and tries to read a book, but his mind starts to wander again. He thinks about what he will do after he has fulfilled his promise to Jenny. He decides to write, travel, read books, take photos, and do everything he wants without feeling guilty about any of it. But the main question is if that day is ever going to come. His contemplations are interrupted as he observes Wooyeon approaching him. Wooyeon inquires about what he's reading, prompting Inseop to display the book titled, "This Book Will Save Your Life." The interviewer, positioned just behind Wooyeon, asks Inseop if the book pertains to rescue work. Suddenly, she realizes she hasn't formally introduced herself to Wooyeon's manager. She hands Inseop her card and tells him that she is Yoon Ari-yoon from the monthly Blue magazine. Inseop, in return, quickly writes his name and number on the back of the same book they had been talking about, rips it, and hands over the piece of paper with a smile, while introducing himself as Wooyeon's manager. Ari-yoon looks clearly baffled by this, so Inseop apologizes and clarifies that he does not have a business card to offer yet. She chuckles while looking at the piece of paper that Inseop handed to her, and assures him that she will make good use of it. Wooyeon, who was standing nearby, interjects, questioning if he's missing out on something amusing, as Ari-yoon mentions that his manager just gave her his phone number. Inseop is taken aback by her phrasing. It sounds entirely inappropriate. Even Wooyeon appears confused by this, prompting Inseop to swiftly deny it. Finally, Ari-yoon chuckles and explains that she exchanged her business card for his manager's number. Inseop is not sure if that explanation was even helpful because he catches Wooyeon looking at him with an undecipherable expression, as if he wants to ask something. Once the interview is done, Aryun and Wooyeon exchange pleasantries and say goodbyes. Aryun tells Wooyeon that she will be rooting for his new series, and then she asks Inseop if she can really call him on the number that he has provided her. Inseop mutters that she can, but only if it is a work-related call. Aryun chuckles at his nervous response and assures him that she is only kidding, before saying a final goodbye and leaving the room. Once she is gone, Wooyeon turns to Inseop and asks him if that is what his type is. Inseop doesn't understand what he is implying, so Wooyeon clarifies and asks if that is the type of woman that he is attracted to. Inseop is puzzled, but he clarifies that he only gave his phone number because she gave him her card, and he didn't have one to offer her back. He then quickly starts to apologize and assures Wooyeon that he didn't give her his number with any romantic intentions in mind. He once again apologizes to him for causing a misunderstanding, and starts to squirm while waiting for his response. Wooyeon halts and reassures him that there are no misunderstandings here. He can give her his number if he likes her. Inseop once again clarifies that it was not the case. Wooyeon lets it go this time but inquires about Inseop's preferences for women. He wonders if Inseop prefers women akin to Ms. Yoon, refined and traditionally feminine. Inseop has no idea how to respond to it. He digresses from the topic and tells him that they'll be leaving for the next location now and starts to drive, hoping that the topic will die down, but Wooyeon is persistent. He asks Inseop if he doesn't have a type. Inseop is still silent, which makes him wonder loudly if it is even possible for people to not have a type at all. Inseop is dying on the inside. What is with this incessant teasing? He told him that was not his intention while giving his number, so why can't he just quit it? Why is he behaving this way suddenly? Inseop realizes that Wooyeon is not going to give up unless he gets an answer, so he decides to finally speak. With a huge sigh, he tells him that he has one type. Wooyeon is curious as to what it is, so Inseop tells him. He tells him that his type is a kind person. Wooyeon prompts him to tell him more, but Inseop tells him that it is all he wants. Wooyeon chuckles at the thought, commenting on how easy it is to find someone like that. But Inseop tells him that he is wrong, because kind people are the rarest of the rare. Wooyeon grins at this, but he can't believe that kindness is all Inseop asks for in his partner. It is surprising to him that people like him still exist in this day and age. But this response makes him curious about something else altogether. He asks Inseop if he has ever been in love with someone kind yet. He asks him if his first love was a kind person, and what kind of person were they exactly. As soon as he asks this, he notices Inseop visibly pausing and trying his hardest to control his emotions. Poor thing looks like he's about to cry at any moment. His intense reaction makes Wooyeon wonder if Inseop's first love died or something. But he's having too much fun to stop now. He repeats his question once again. For Inseop, it is a complete nightmare. He begs Wooyeon to stop in his mind. Out of all the questions he had asked today, this was the hardest, but he knew that there was no way out of this persistent questioning, so he decided to end it with an honest answer. He tells Wooyeon that his first love was a bad person. This is very intriguing. A bad person. Not only that, Wooyeon can't even wrap his head around the fact that a timid person like Inseop already had his first love. He chuckles at his own crude remark and apologizes, explaining that he didn't mean to make fun of him. It's simply that Inseop remains so aloof of these things that the idea that he too can be in love never crossed his mind. Inseop, wanting to change the topic, attempts to divert Wooyeon's focus by presenting him with the envelope he got from the woman earlier in the garage. Wooyeon inquires about its contents, prompting Inseop to explain that it was given to him by a fan earlier in the day. His pathetic attempt to change the subject does not go unnoticed by Wooyeon, but Inseop doesn't stop. He continues to tell him that he accepted it because it was a present, when suddenly, something, or rather someone, appears right in front of the car out of nowhere. Inseop gasps but quickly brings the car to a halt, averting a terrible disaster by mere inches. It is the same lady who had given him the envelope earlier, and she is now right outside the passenger seat's window, banging on it and professing her love for her Wooyeon oppa. Wooyeon is so done with so-called fans like her. If he were in control, he would have likely pressed down on the accelerator instead of stopping. However, since that's already happened, he opts to leave the crazy behind and check on Inseop. But as he turns towards him, he is taken aback by Inseop's condition. Inseop is still clutching the envelope he intended to give him, and his hand is dripping with blood. Wooyeon quickly snatches the envelope out of Inseop's bloody hand and discovers a blade hidden inside it. Still holding his bloody hand in his, Wooyeon asks Inseop if he is badly injured. Inseop insists that he is fine, but Wooyeon can't ignore all that blood. He asks Inseop to hold on while he calls Mr. Cha for help. Inseop is horrified by the suggestion. He pleads with Wooyeon not to contact Mr. Cha or inform the CEO about the situation. He expresses his reluctance to cause any further inconvenience. Despite insisting on driving with his blood-soaked hand, Inseop's concerns weigh heavily on Wooyeon's mind. He wonders why Inseop feels that he is a burden to the CEO and Mr. Cha, as that doesn't seem to be the case at all. Inseop tries to convince Wooyeon that his cut isn't that deep, but flinches right away as soon as the paper is removed from his injured hand. Wooyeon tells him that they have to go to the hospital anyway. Even if that is the case, this time, Inseop looks down and agrees quietly. Wooyeon sighs and tells him that he will at least keep his wish of not telling the CEO or Mr. Cha about this incident, and Inseop thanks him for the kind consideration. But he is forgetting one thing. It's Wooyeon he is dealing with, and he does nothing just out of consideration. He asks for a favor from Inseop in exchange for keeping this incident a secret. He asks him if he is up for it. After a long day at work, when Inseop comes back home, he thinks about what a bizarre day it has been. Wooyeon wanted him to go to the hospital, get treated, and go back home as his favor in exchange for keeping his secret, so he agreed to do as asked. He can postpone one of his interviews and even drove him back home. Once inside, Inseop takes off his suit jacket and goes to check on Kate first. He still remembers why he got her. As he became more and more busier, and life started to get lonely for him, plants were his only last resort. And it is then that this mimosa plant caught his attention. Unlike other plants, the leaves on this one would flinch when touched, which felt more like having a pet than a plant. And so he brought her home and gave her a name. He named her Kate. Ever since that day, Kate became the only one that he could open his heart to in Korea. He tells Kate that he came back early today because he got injured and that he isn't feeling quite well. Speaking his heart out finally brings a string of emotions that he has been suppressing all day, and he drops down on the floor, finally letting out his frustration on how he can't do anything correctly. He doesn't even have much time left, but he still keeps on making mistakes. He confesses that Lee Wooyeon, or Philip rather, is completely driving him crazy and nothing is going his way. Tears roll down his face uncontrollably as he apologizes to Jenny, but she isn't here to soothe him like before. He feels like he is in a chokehold of guilt and shame all the time, and it makes it harder for him to breathe. Inseop has finally calmed down and taken a seat when suddenly his phone dings. He finds out that the journalist from earlier today, Yoon Ryum, has sent the text. Inseop feels conflicted about the text message. After the debacle today in front of Wooyeon, he is conflicted to even respond to the message. It isn't related to work, so there's no need to respond, right? Also, more importantly, there's a text message from Wooyeon too, asking him to rest well before tomorrow's filming. Inseop can hardly think about anything else after reading that message, even though it is nothing special. This is the first time he has received a text message directly from Wooyeon, and his heart can't stop acting up because of it. The weariness from the day and all these unexplainable emotions make him feel really exhausted. He thinks back about all the things he has endured so far in Korea. If he wrote a diary of all the hardships he had gone through since coming here, it would take exactly 13 diaries to put down all of it. But at least, now he doesn't have to follow Wooyeon like the stalker to collect information. But that is not to say that things have not been harder even now, so much so that he feels like he is dying. He desperately wants to see his mom, Will, Grandma, Mary, and Nicholas too. He wants to go home and have a home-cooked meal instead of eating sandwiches from the bakery every day. And after what happened today, he is so done with scary superfans. He feels so lonely, but even in his loneliness, he thinks of Philip Lee Wooyeon. He tries to convince himself that he doesn't like him. He is supposed to hate him with all his heart. Even though he cries easily and is frightened pretty easily, he hides it from everyone. He hates Wooyeon for it. He hates him because he's a bad person. An awful person whose heart is rotten to the core. Words are not enough to express what he is going through mentally just because of him. And so he vows to hate him more and more, even though tears stream freely once again from his now closed eyes. While Inseop is trying his best to stop his tears and regain his composure, his phone starts to ring. It's Mr. Kim, the CEO. He picks up the phone immediately and greets him politely. The CEO asks him about his whereabouts and whether he is with Wooyeon at the moment. Inseop tells him that he is at home at the moment because he has to come back due to something urgent. The CEO informs him that he's already aware of the situation because Wooyeon unexpectedly called Mr. Cha, deeming it urgent. This is the last thing Inseop wanted, to inconvenience others due to his injuries. He assures the CEO that he'll immediately go to Wooyeon to address the issue, but the CEO dismisses the idea, stating that Mr. Cha can handle it. Additionally, it would put Mr. Cha in a difficult position because Wooyeon had warned them that if they compelled him to work, he would designate Mr. Cha as his manager from then on. Inseop didn't like it. He apologizes to the CEO once again for the trouble he has caused, but the CEO dismisses it with a laugh and asks him if it would be possible for him to drop by the office tonight. Inseop asks him what time he should drop by. Upon arriving at the office later that night, Inseop encounters Mr. Cha, who inquires if he's resolved everything before arriving. Inseop confirms and apologizes once more for the trouble. Mr. Cha reassures him it's all right, but hopes there won't be any urgent matters to deal with that day. He acknowledges that today was indeed an anomaly, but it's only for today, after all. But when they reach the meeting room, something seems off. The room is eerily dark and it seems like nobody is here. Did the CEO go home already? But he told him to be at the office by 9 p.m. tonight. He even said that he would wait for him here. Did he hear him wrong? Suddenly, the room illuminates with a loud bang, and party poppers fly all around. Inseop is still clutching onto Mr. Cha, trembling in fear because of the shock, when all the people gathered in the room start to sing the happy birthday song. The CEO walks in with a big smile on his face, carrying a huge birthday cake, and wishes Inseop a very happy birthday. Inseop is completely lost. He stares at everything without blinking. The CEO tries to bring his attention back to the cake, saying that it is heavy. Mr. Cha asks him not to be so surprised because since it is his birthday today, it is obvious that there will be a party for him. However, Inseop's mind is preoccupied with a different matter entirely. He suddenly realizes that today is likely the birthday of Choi Inseop, the individual whose identity he's been assuming. While those around him urge him to blow out the candle and make a wish, Inseop ponders if this is why Mr. Cha took over for him today. The CEO chuckles and extends birthday wishes once more, congratulating him on his recovery from the hospital and encouraging him to continue his good work. Finally, he prompts Inseop to blow out the candles quickly. Inseop does as he is asked, but he is unbelievably quiet. The CEO jokes and asks him if he is moved by all of this. He guesses that maybe he is so touched by the surprise that he has decided to work here for his life. Inseop, who was quiet for so long, finally decides to speak after the CEO's supposed joke. He mumbles that he doesn't feel comfortable with all of this. When the CEO asks him what he means, he reiterates clearly this time that events like this make him uncomfortable, so he would prefer that these kinds of things are not planned for him ever again. And without meeting his eyes, he tells him that he will be leaving and rushes out of the room without a second thought. Mr. Cha keeps calling for him, but he doesn't stop. He's out of breath climbing all those stairs, but he can't stop now because it makes him want to go back and tell them all of his true feelings. Sweat beating down from his temple, his breath haggard, he finally reaches the terrace and goes in. He wants to tell them so badly how thankful he is for all the kindness they are showing him. He wants to tell them that he too wants to get closer to them. He wants to hang out with them when they are not working and watch movies together. He too wants to call each other whenever they feel lonely and talk about anything and everything without thinking too much. He wants to be that close with them, but he can't. He is not deserving of any of that because in the end, all he is planning to do is stab everyone who works with Lee Wooyeon in their backs and leave for good. He drops to his knees on the floor, grabs his head in both of his hands as if in physical pain, and cries his heart out. He keeps thinking that he must not act like a kid and keep his composure as an adult, that the guilt and pain are too much to bear. What he fails to notice in his fit of emotions is that he is not the only one on the terrace. Inseop almost falls backward when he notices someone else is on the terrace, silently watching the debacle that he is showcasing. Lee Wooyeon is on the terrace with him. Once noticed, he finally takes a swig of his cigarette and approaches Inseop. Inseop's mind is racing a mile a minute. He looks at Wooyeon as if he has seen a ghost. Wooyeon too can read the confusion on his face clearly. He approaches Inseop, and after letting him calm down a bit, asks him if he is wondering what he is doing here, instead of being at home. Inseop affirms the question, and so, Wooyeon elaborates that he's here because Mr. Cha mentioned something urgent that would take no more than 10 minutes. Noticing the crowd downstairs, he opted for the terrace for a quick smoke. Inseop acknowledges this and promptly averts his gaze downward. Now what is Inseop supposed to explain about his immature display just now? He can die of embarrassment just thinking about it. Suddenly, Wooyeon comes even closer and crouches in front of him. He asks Inseop why he is crying. When there is no answer, he peers into his eyes and asks him once again what is the matter. Instead of explaining, Inseop apologizes to him. Annoyed, Wooyeon tells him that he doesn't need his apology. He just wants to know why he is crying. And this time, Inseop believed him. He wasn't asking it just to show an act of pity or concern. There was pure curiosity on his face. The moment he found his manager bursting into the terrace and starting to weep like a child, another question popped up in Wooyeon's mind. Why is this guy like this? Why is he behaving like an idiot? He insists on knowing why Inseop is crying once again. After all the prompting, Inseop finally sniffles and tells him that he cried because he felt very touched. He adds that he was very much moved by the fact that everyone planned a birthday party for him. Technically, Inseop wasn't lying this time. He did cry because he felt 20% touched, but about 70% of it was because he felt guilty and the rest 10% was because he couldn't help being a pessimist. This is news to Wooyeon. He didn't even know that it was Inseop's birthday today. He asked him why he didn't tell him about it earlier. Inseop just brushes the question aside, but then Wooyeon once again asks him if he was really moved that much by the party that he felt like crying. Inseop tells him that it was exactly the case and begs him quietly to let it slide now. But Wooyeon's curiosity is far from being appeased. He wonders how something so ordinary can move him so much and how he can like someone just if they are kind. Inseop, confused about where this is going, once again affirms it. Wooyeon then wonders if being someone like that is easy or difficult. But then, this thought leads to another question in his mind. He glances at Inseop and asks him if he also cries like this when he is being kind to him. Inseop stares at him with an unreadable expression, which prompts him to ask him if he is going to cry again now. Inseop finally answers and tells him that it is not like that, and he doesn't cry so easily. He clarifies that he only cried today because he was caught off guard. He asks Wooyeon not to worry about it. The truth was that he valued professionalism a lot and never wanted to cause anyone any kind of inconvenience. That remained the same even for Lee Wooyeon, who was the object of his revenge and hatred. Wooyeon starts to respond that he is very much worried, but suddenly a bang is heard from behind, which makes him hold his thoughts. It's the CEO running towards them while calling for Inseop worriedly. When he reaches them, Wooyeon asks him why he made his manager cry, which makes the CEO even more worried. He looks at Inseop for answers, when Wooyeon adds that not only did he just cry, he practically sobbed out here. Hearing all that, Inseop just wished that he could fly or jump off this roof right this instant. Mr. Kim, the CEO, worriedly asked him why he was sobbing. Didn't he run out because he was angry? Wooyeon asks him why he would be angry. The CEO explains that since he left in a hurry saying that parties make him uncomfortable, he thought that Inseop was mad at them for calling him so late for something like this. Wooyeon looks at Inseop and refutes that he cried, because he was moved to tears instead. This revelation made the CEO feel much easier because he was thinking that he was pissed at being dragged into something like this again. Instead of correcting him, Inseop apologizes to him for making him worry, but the CEO is already back to his jolly self again. He tells Inseop that if he is not angry, he should come and join the party again. He explains how he thought that Inseop was just distant, but he turned out to be a huge softie too. After all, how grateful was he that he even teared up because of a party? Inseop agrees to the CEO, who then starts to lead him back downstairs to the party. Inseop can't believe that he has to now attend a party with his eyes all red and puffy like this. This is beyond embarrassing for him. His thoughts are interrupted when the CEO chuckles and advises him that if he is feeling that grateful, he can just continue to work hard. Inseop smiles and assures him that he will do just that. While those two chatter amongst themselves, Wooyeon notices that Mr. Kim hasn't caught on to what is going on, and even Inseop seems oblivious. His mind is a mess trying to understand Inseop. He thought that reading him was going to be a piece of cake, but then this guy did some things at times that made it hard to understand him. And just when he thought that he could no longer understand him, he became quite simple to read. While Wooyeon still tries to figure out his manager's intentions, the CEO calls for him, asking him if he will join them too, but his face clearly seems to be wishing against it. Wooyeon tells him as a matter of fact that it is not even a question that needs to be asked, to which the CEO responds with a laugh. But in his mind, he is certain that he is not a guy who cares for his manager's ordinary birthday party. Wooyeon proves him wrong when he smiles and tells him that of course, he is going to join. Both of them, the CEO and Inseop, are left speechless by this sudden change in his behavior. Later that night, everything seems to be swaying, and Inseop feels like he will throw up. Wooyeon, who's walking alongside him, asks him if he's okay. Inseop wipes his mouth and staggers forward, responding that he is fine. Wooyeon clicks his tongue at his sorry state. This is obviously the result of not refusing any drinks. And not just that, he's even refusing to take a taxi or be driven home now. When he asked him earlier, he kept insisting that his house was just within walking distance from here, even though he could hardly stand without wobbling for a minute. He kept saying this again and again until his words started to slur. He wasn't wrong, though. His house was indeed at walking distance, if only he were sober. It was a gathering that was held after a long time, so it was apparent that everyone got drunk. When Mr. Cha started chugging wine directly from the bottle, it was clear that he had no intentions of being the designated driver that day. Even Wooyeon himself had a few glasses, which was offered to him by the CEO, but he isn't the type to get a driver either, and so he was stuck with Inseop now, walking home together. On their walk, Inseop slumps on the road beside a building and keeps on spouting rubbish, saying that he is digi. Wooyeon has no clue what he wants or whatever he is saying, but realizes later that he is saying that he is dizzy. Wooyeon asks him to stand up, since he can't sleep outside in weather like this. Inseop nods and agrees, but still stays slumped against the wall. Wooyeon is losing his patience. He asks him one last time if he is going to stay here like this, and just like a tape recorder, Inseop agrees to this too. That's it. Wooyeon announces his departure, and Inseop bows to him before bidding goodbye in a mumbled voice. Checking his phone, Wooyeon notes the temperature at 3 degrees Celsius today. Casting one final glance at his hapless manager, he resolves that he won't freeze to death even if he spends the night here. With that decision made, he begins to leave but halts after a few steps. Pausing for a moment, he retraces his steps toward Inseop, who remains huddled against the wall and nudges him with his shoe once more, prompting him to get up. If he leaves him like this here, it is only going to disrupt his schedule for tomorrow. Also, they will be starting with the filming at dawn tomorrow, and Inseop in the state that he is in. If he doesn't turn up tomorrow, this will give him a good excuse to fire him. After all, he has been tolerating him for over a month now. This is exactly the opportunity that he needs. But at the same time, he can't deny that Inseop looks so young and naive that anybody can easily mistake him for a student. He is so lanky that even his suit looks too heavy on his shoulders. It's a wonder how he manages the amount of work that he does. It's still puzzling to Wooyeon why exactly he decided to come back, but he needed to get this guy up. After nudging him about 3 to 4 times, Inseop finally opens his eyes, but Wooyeon has already reached his limit. He decides that if he doesn't listen to him this time, he will leave him to freeze here. But Inseop, being as unreadable as ever, does something bizarre instead. He grabs Wooyeon's leg tightly, and while Wooyeon is still trying to figure out whether he should kick him or not, he starts to sob uncontrollably once again. But this time, when tears fall like a stream from his eyes, he calls for someone. He begs someone named Jenny to not leave him. Was he really calling him Jenny? Wooyeon had always seen his awkward manager as a bit of a loser, but it turned out he actually dated someone, a foreign girl no less. Wooyeon tries to shake Inseop again to get his attention, asking if there's anyone he can call for him. He questions if Inseop has any friends, to which Inseop responds with a sarcastic laugh, saying doesn't have any friends, not even one. Wooyeon is annoyed by Inseop's tone, but decides to set aside his irritation for the moment, as there are more pressing matters to attend to. With no other options in mind, Wooyeon tries to ask him for his phone. If he can get hold of this Jenny woman somehow, he could be rid of this nuisance of a manager. But once he gets hold of it, what he finds on Inseop's phone shocks him a little. There are no other calls made except for the office, himself, the CEO, and the office again. His entire call log only had calls from work, or from people he works with. The same was the case for the texts as well. Upon further inspection of his phone, he discovers that aside from his schedule, There's no other information stored on it. This revelation leads Wooyeon to realize that this phone doesn't belong to an ordinary person. Just by glancing at it, one could deduce that Choi Inseop's life revolved entirely around Lee Wooyeon. The notion elicits a smirk from Wooyeon. People are used to remembering their firsts more vividly, be it their first kiss, first love, first breakup, or whatever. For Inseop, this was the first memory he had of him drinking. Peter grew up under his mother's watchful eyes, who forbade him from any unhealthy food and made him eat only tasteless organic vegetables. So when Jenny handed him those cans of beers that she sneaked in that day, he felt more excited than anxious. It wasn't the same old eggnog with whiskey like at Christmas, but rather, he was going to get a taste of the real thing this time. They decided to go to the lake, which was only 30 minutes away, to try it, so that they could be away from any watchful eyes. When they arrived at the location, he asked Jenny if she had tried alcohol before. Jenny told him that she obviously had, and once he took a sip, she asked him how it was. Peter couldn't understand its appeal at first because it made him cough and even the taste was awful. Jenny called him uncultured because apparently no one drank for the taste. This puzzled him and he ended up asking her why people drank then. Jenny smiled and told him that they drank because it made them look cool. Peter was still trying to figure out how something that tastes so gross can be so cool. He wondered how his mom and dad acted like they were drinking the most delicious thing in the world, which made Jenny laugh out loud. Jenny then asked for a toast for hers and the prince's love. Just the thought of the prince still made Peter feel some kind of way, and he was hardly able to contain the blush creeping up on his face. Jenny had mistaken it for him getting drunk, and he played along with that. She tutted and remarked that this was why he couldn't hang out with other kids, and when he pouted in response, she started laughing out loud. She was having too much fun at his expense, but Peter liked it when Jenny laughed like that. Listening to her having fun like this made him want to make her laugh even more. After all, he couldn't do anything else whenever she spiraled into depression. Jenny had a severe case of bipolar disorder. When he met her for the first time during one of her episodes, she was barely recognizable. He became worried and went to see her at her house, but what he witnessed there was beyond shocking to him. Jenny had always told him that she didn't eat much and had no idea why she kept gaining weight, but what he witnessed that day made it all clear. Jenny was stress eating during one of her episodes. The saddest part of it all is that instead of getting support from her family, Jenny had to deal with some other hardships too. Her mother used to beat her for ridiculous reasons, and she was determined to move out as soon as she became an adult. Peter, too, was waiting for that day to come soon. But once her dark, gloomy clouds of thoughts subsided, and she emerged from the dark tunnels of her depression, she always came back to him with a cheery smile, as if nothing ever happened. She would regale him with stories about her Aunt Spencer, which Peter knew were made up because reality was too harsh for her. But never once did he want to point it out to her and expose her again to her harsh reality. This time, too, she was telling him about how the prince had smiled at her with his eyes in the cafeteria, which was a sign that he was totally into her. She knew that soon enough he was going to talk to her again. He had just agreed to her at the time, joining in on her happiness, but when she asked him if he had a crush on anyone, Peter had to lie without a doubt. He said that he didn't like anyone, but she argued that there were lots of pretty girls in the class. He told her that she was pretty too, but she was not having it. She said that she already had a guy that she liked, but agreed that if it doesn't work out with her prince, she will give it a thought. He had joked if he was a candidate too, but she responded with something even more touching. Jenny said that he was not a candidate, but a friend, and for him, she would even give her heart out. He then smiled and told her that since she was his friend too, he wouldn't try to steal her away from the prince either. Jenny, being the good friend that she was, took pity on him and said that she hoped they could meet again in the next life so that she could make him his number one. The effects of the drink started to show after a while, and Peter started to feel good. He was finally able to understand why people chose to do this. But Jenny was surprised to hear that because he only had half a can till now, which was clearly not enough to make judgments about it. In the beautiful night sky above them, they witnessed a shooting star together and discussed each other's wishes. Jenny's wish was, of course, to go out with the prince. But when Peter chuckled at the thought, she knew that he was completely drunk. She advised him to find someone who he liked soon, too. Peter was sure that wasn't going to happen, but Jenny told him that as long as he was sure about it, he didn't even need to worry about them liking him back. Once he has taken the first step, it gets easier soon, because the truth was that no one could stop their heart from liking someone. It's his eyes that follow them first, and before he knows it, it would be too late already. It's the realization when he knows that they are already in his heart, before his eyes have settled on them. Peter was intrigued. He wanted Jenny to tell him more about the feeling of liking someone. As requested, Jenny proceeded to tell him that by the time he realized his feelings, the person he liked would already become his entire world, just like her prince was her whole world now. Peter wanted to say that he was his entire world too, but he kept that to himself. But in any case, his first drinking experience was an absolute blast until he threw up that night. Back to the present, Inseop was going through the same painful experience that he had for the first time all those years ago. As soon as he opens his eyes, his head starts to throb. He couldn't refuse any drinks last night and had to take them all because, in Korea, it is rude to refuse drinks offered by the superiors. He feels very parched too. Not to forget how he had to take on violence as a gift for his birthday because apparently a birthday bash is a literal thing here. Feeling his bones aching all over, he sits up and hunches over with his head in his hand. When someone asks him if he wants some water, he responds yes, and a mug of water is offered to him immediately. Inseop takes the cup thinking how nice this person is, even though he doesn't know who they are, and starts to thank them. But his gratitude doesn't last very long. As soon as he recognizes who actually offered him water, he almost spits it out. A very agitated Wooyeon stood in front of him, wearing nothing but a bath towel around his waist. What is he supposed to say? Where should he look? What is he doing here? Wooyeon tells him that he was so drunk yesterday that he passed out on the street. He asks him if he has any recollection of that. He then tells him that he tried his best to wake him up, but it was to no avail. Hence, he was left with no other choice but to bring him to his house before anyone else could snatch him off the streets. With a mischievous look, he adds that it was quite a workout carrying him all the way home. Inseop doesn't know what to say. It is already unbelievable for him that Wooyeon carried him all the way here. He asks him once again, just to make sure he didn't hear him wrong. Wooyeon tells him that it was difficult for him to carry him here, not because he is heavy, but rather because he is so skinny that his bones kept stabbing him everywhere. He advises him to eat more. Of course, that wasn't entirely true. All he did was hail a cab to take him home. But watching Inseop squirm uncomfortably at the thought of inconveniencing him like that was too much fun for Wooyeon. Inseop apologizes to him with a silly face, but is useless because all hard work was done by the taxi driver for a hefty tip. Unaware of the reality, Inseop is sure that he will be fired now for causing trouble for Wooyeon, who even had to carry him all the way. He apologizes to Jenny in his mind for not being able to do even this much for her. He starts to find an exit in the room so that he can save himself from getting any more embarrassed, but Wooyeon interrupts him. He asks him what he is doing. Without waiting for an answer, he asks him to go take a shower and get ready, because they are starting filming today and they can't afford to be late. Once they are ready and set to leave, Inseop apologizes to Wooyeon for not getting his coffee prepared. Wooyeon tells him that it's okay, but confirms that Inseop isn't drunk driving at the moment. Inseop assures him that he is completely sober. How can he not when the first thing that he saw once he opened his eyes today was a half-naked Wooyeon right in front of him. Wooyeon tells him that he may not be feeling drunk, but the blood alcohol levels are a different concern altogether. Inseop assures him that he will pick up some medicine on his way, but Wooyeon chuckles and tells him that he is just pulling his leg. Wooyeon's playful mood was still not enough to calm Inseop's worries down. He still wonders if he made any mistakes while drunk last night. He asks Wooye on what he wants for breakfast, and Wooyeon suggests that they can stop by a gas station for it. Wooyeon can see that Inseop was visibly disturbed because he couldn't have his breakfast today because of him. He assures him that food trucks are going to be there in the set, so he can eat there if he wants. But Inseop refuses and tells him that they'll be stopping at a gas station for food. Wooyeon tells him that he doesn't want to anymore, since they don't have much time left. Inseop tries to disagree, but he knows that it's futile. He's aware of how energy-draining it is to be on a location shoot, and having breakfast in that case is very important. But he had to go and mess everything up with his stupid drinking. He should have drunk more responsibly yesterday. He takes a huge sigh thinking about his stupidity. Wooyeon picks up on this and inquires if Inseop is feeling alright or if he senses a headache coming on. Inseop assures him that he's fine, but Wooyeon then inquires about his hand. Inseop reassures him that his hands are also fine now, nearly fully recovered. Finally, Wooyeon remarks that Inseop must have had quite a bit to drink yesterday. Inseop agrees and tells him that he had no choice, because it was a part of his birthday puns. Birthday puns? What is this guy talking about? It takes a moment for Wooyeon to realize what he is referring to, but it elicits a chuckle from him when he understands what he means. He playfully corrects Inseop and tells him that it is a birthday punch and not birthday puns. Inseop turns crimson and repeats it after him. Wooyeon couldn't see what he looked like at that moment, but he wanted so badly for him to turn around so that he could have a look. Inseop finally confronts his fear and apologizes to Wooyeon in case he made any mistakes last night while he was drunk. Wooyeon chuckles and assures him that he didn't make any mistake. He just acted like the usual drunk. But this is not what Inseop wanted to hear. He found no solace in the fact that he was so out of control last night. All he wanted to do now was open the car door and just jump out of it. But Inseop's inner rambling comes to an immediate half when Wooyeon asks him his next question. He asks him if Jenny was the bad person that he told him about yesterday. He chuckled and added, was she the first love he talked about? The bad person? Inseop reaches his breaking point. He shouts that Jenny isn't like that, and Wooyeon shouldn't speak ill of her when he knows nothing about her. Wooyeon quickly apologizes to Inseop for his words, and Inseop accepts the apology, acknowledging that he shouldn't have spoken about Jenny in that way without knowing anything about her. Of course, this apology was just a formality, but Wooyeon was surprised to see Inseop react that way. Never in a million years did he think that he would get this mad at him for something. Once they reach the set, Inseop quietly follows Wooyeon inside, who was asked to head to the makeup room. He feels relieved that Wooyeon didn't seem to be angry, even after his outburst earlier. He sits silently in the makeup room while Wooyeon is getting his makeup done for the shoot. He didn't know that makeup for historical shows took way more time than the modern ones.